With Elon Musk campaigning for Donald Trump, it made me do a little bit of thinking. What's going to happen to the eVTOL industry depending on the outcome of the election? Well, I've done a bit of digging around and I found a nice interview of Adam Goldstein talking about the effects of the US leadership on Archer as a business. So we're not going to hesitate and we're going to jump right on over to it.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a really good panel just prior there. In fact, the last few panels have all been very good. I've got the distinct pleasure this morning of introducing Archer's founder and CEO, Adam Goldstein.
Thanks,
and it is not often you get to interview your boss in front of a big crowd, so we'll certainly take advantage of it. And we've heard a lot about what is happening in this space certainly at a macro level. But I thought it'd be good for us to kind of take a step back, kind of think about what we're trying to achieve, and certainly give you an idea where we are from an Archer perspective. We've heard a lot about flying cars, urban air mobility for many years. Why is there so much interest in it now? And so my first question to Adam is, what do you think Archer will do to commercialize in the near term, and then why do it now?
So the industry has really come a long way, and we've heard a lot about flying cars for really over a decade. And there was actually a funny article that was written. Mark Andreessen said, where are the flying cars, right? We have 140 characters, but we still don't have flying cars. And really the answer to why now has to do with really three big points. The first one is the core underlying technologies that power this industry, batteries, have matured to a point where we can now fly economically viable missions, meaning we can carry enough payload far enough, fast enough that people would be willing to pay for that, and we can ultimately build a business on the back of that. The second big unlock for the industry has been capital. You can imagine the pitch going to a VC or a private equity fund and saying, hey, I need to raise $1 billion of capital pre-product. What do you think? You interested? That's a tough pitch. And it hasn't been until really the success of Tesla that the investment community has been willing to invest such large dollars on a new industry, an unproven industry.
Now, let me know below, do you think Archer will be the next Tesla when it comes to the aviation industry?
But the capital markets really opened up to a point where you could raise a lot of money. Over $20 billion has come into the industry over the past just several years. And then the third thing is really all about the regulatory environment. Billy did a great job as the administrator of the FAA in helping set a precedent for what's to come and really setting this tone that the US needs to maintain a leadership position in aviation, and that urban air mobility is it's really a thing that everybody wants to see. It's not really something that's up for debate. It doesn't really lean one side of the aisle or the other. It's something I think everybody wants to happen: quieter, safer, lower cost flights. I think those three things together have really enabled this whole industry.
Yeah, and so you think about it. I know we heard from the previous panel about this whole notion around the U.S. leadership and what it means. So, why is it important both to the U.S. and to the world that we do UAM, urban air mobility, and that we do it now?
Our cities are just fundamentally jammed with people and constrained. The transportation grid is built in 2D, yet the cities keep getting more congested with people that live and work in 3D. So we live in apartment buildings and in office buildings. And it's created this issue where it's very difficult to scale the transportation infrastructure inside these cities. And so the obvious choice would be to go to the air, but it's very challenging to go to the air. And you've seen it tried with helicopters. And so, New York City is a great example, was a very active helicopter market. But the challenge with trying to solve the really congestion issue with helicopters is that it's very challenging to scale helicopters. And it's really challenging for three main reasons. the Blade CEO says it's challenging for three main reasons, and that's noise, noise, and noise. That's the New York City kind of challenge. But there are real reasons. Noise is certainly at the top.
Yeah.
It's very disruptive to the communities below to have multiple helicopters in the air. The second real challenge around scaling helicopters has been around the safety case. If we were to put tens of thousands of these vehicles, hundreds of thousands of these vehicles, the safety standards have to be really high. And then finally, the cost. It is very expensive to fly helicopters. eVTOL solve all three of these issues. These are vehicles that, as a category, it's not even an Archer thing, as a category, get the benefits of all three of these things.
So we got a lot of players in this space, everybody with this idea of hoping to get to market. And we see the players, we've heard lots of conversations, not only today, but in the time leading up to this really critical summit. What's unique about Archer as we think about it?
The industry really started back in 2009, and it really started when Larry Page went to a professor at Stanford named DeLon Crow and said, we should be building electric airplanes. They should take off vertically. Everyone should have one. And he had just taken possession of a Roadster, and this was a really exciting new venture. And one of the first engineers really to work on the industry was Archer's COO, Tom Muniz. And so Tom has been in the industry building many different vehicles. The Midnight vehicle that Archer's building is the 8th full-scale vehicle that Tom's built. But the industry went through this period of time, a decade plus, where it was really focused on R&D. It's super unique to have an industry go through one of these changes where the design space is wide open again. You can literally build a vehicle with one engine, one rotor, or 100. And they all have really interesting positives and negatives. So the industry went through this decade period of time where R&D was the focus. The vision around Archer really was all about taking an industry that was really focused on R&D and moving it into the commercialization phase. So we did that by designing a vehicle that could be certified from the very beginning and could be mass manufactured from the very beginning. So we made choices like we put a pilot in the vehicle. That made a lot of sense. It's much easier to go to market with a pilot than without a pilot. We decided not to 3D print, even though it's so compelling to want to make new parts that are much lighter and much lower cost that you can build in volume, but also more difficult to certify because there's less data. We made choices to not vertically integrate everything. Again, so tempting to go want to do that because there's so many advantages. But what I wanted to build was a vehicle that could get to market, that could get through the certification process, that could get into mass manufacturing. And my saying internally, and I think it's...
No, Adam confirmed this in a recent interview with Joe Ben involved, that he's trying to get to market as quick as possible before investors pull out. He's worried about the likes of an AI boom, where investors all pull out and they go on to the next big thing.
It's actually held true, has been a third of the time, a third of the people, and a third of the capital. And Archer has moved really, really quickly to do that. It all centered around building a vehicle that was based around a business case that we could certify and manufacture.
Yeah. So we just heard from Jim Viola talking about helicopters and how we sort of see. So I want to get your question. When we think about helicopters, and I've got tens of thousands of hours as an airline pilot, but I also got about 4,000 hours in helicopters. And I recognize some of the failure points associated with that, and the noise and all of the things that people think about. So are eVTOLs really an adequate replacement for helicopters? Can you talk a little bit about the performance and what that might mean for the market?
Yeah, so we get this question all the time. Comparison of, there's a lot of advantages of eVTOLs, but what are some of the disadvantages and how will that change over time? And so to date, what Archer's building is a vehicle that can carry 1,000 pounds of payload, can fly up to 100 miles, 150 miles per hour. And so when you think about that in comparison to helicopters, helicopters have superior performance. They can carry more payload and they can go further. But eVTOLs are unique in the sense that the fuel source, lithium-ion batteries, or batteries in general, are getting better every single year. And that's been the case for decades. So our product inherently gets better every single year. And even if we just extrapolated the trends, the catch-up in performance will happen in a handful of years. But there have been tens of billions of dollars that have come into battery R&D over just the past few years that we're hopeful that will pay dividends to grow the performance even beyond what you see with helicopters today. But there is a point here where the performance will be really positive and potentially better than helicopters, but the fuel capabilities, the batteries, just keep getting better. And we're agnostic. We're happy to switch batteries when they get better. So what will likely happen at that point is we'll start removing batteries from the plane. We'll use less, which will just keep lowering the costs of these vehicles. So there's this unique aspect that the industry will have where over time, through scale and through technology advancements, I believe you'll be able to drive down the cost per flight to below cost of ownership. It'll take time, but it certainly has a path to do that.
Right, and we've heard a lot today, and we'll continue to hear a lot about FAA reauthorization, the role of the government. If this industry is truly going to be a success, from your perspective, what is it that we need to see from the U.S. government to make this happen and maintain?
No, this is one of the main points of today. Whose team are you on? Are you Team Trump or are you Team Harris? And who do you think will be better for the eVTOL industry? Not just Archer alone, but the likes of Joby. So let me know below.
Maintain our leadership in the world.
I think the most important thing that we need to do, and I'll echo a comment that Brian made in the panel before. We need to choose if we want the US to maintain a leadership position in aviation. eVTOLs are actually, when you think about our ability to get to market, it's actually pretty doable. We're effectively going to be swapping equipment that exists today, helicopters, with lower noise, safer vehicles. It's another way to think about that is these are electric helicopters with wings. They're certified in ways that are very similar to existing aircraft today. The only real interesting, unique, novel thing from a certification standpoint is the electric powertrain. That is different. But as a country, I think it's critical that we decide. And the way we decide is to lead by policy. I think policy is the way to make this happen. We know for sure there are other countries that are building eVTOLs that will ultimately get to market. If we continue the path where the leadership of the country, just like you did at the FAA, helps really encourage the US to maintain this leadership position, I think that will do more for the industry than anything else we could ask for.
Right. And I know, Adam, you've signed some partnerships. You've got United Airlines, but you've also got Stellantis. And so why's an auto company participating in this with Archer?
So at first, I think people thought flying cars, well, let's go talk to the auto companies. That makes sense. But I think the reality is the industry is being built for scale from the beginning. Right. And when we look at the aviation industry, it's not really designed for scale. The supply chain isn't designed for scale. The individual vehicles are not designed for scale. The infrastructure isn't designed for scale. But this is the first time really in aviation history where you have the opportunity, the potential to build a type of aircraft that can actually be scaled from a safety perspective, noise perspective, and cost perspective. And so when you look at what the autos have done is they've found ways to automate, drive costs down, and really offer vehicles at prices that can be affordable to literally everyone or a very large percentage of people on the globe. And I think that's what really drove the autos to say, okay, we want to be more than mobility companies, or we want to be more than car companies, we want to be mobility companies. Right. But there are also parts that overlap. So we do use very similar technologies as the auto companies. So for example, electric motors. The technologies are very similar. And I know Brian commented on that as well. Or I think Kyle actually was the one who said it. There's a lot of folks from Tesla, from the auto industry have worked on EVs that are now.
And this is the big thing. Does anyone here think that Tesla will build their own eVTOL? Or could you see them investing in one of the companies that are already doing this?
Out in the eVTOL industry. And so Archer has a big powertrain team, of which a large percent of them come from the auto industry that have worked on electric powertrains. And so I think you see those overlaps and you see those kind of connections and the scale potential, and it makes a lot of sense for the autos to get involved.
Okay, just a couple of minutes remaining here. Any other thoughts that you want to leave the audience with today?
Well, maybe I will turn it over back and ask you a question, Billy. You know, you were the administrator of the FAA, and you had insight into all types of aviation, and you chose to leave and come into the eVTOL industry. And I think that was obviously a huge vote of confidence for the industry, having watched all of the traction that the industry has had. But I think it'd be great to hear your answer on why you decided to come into the eVTOL industry, why now, and then, you know, maybe why Archer.
Yeah, so, well, thanks for the question. I'm a futurist at heart. I love I live and breathe everything aerospace. Grew up, I'm a Trekkie, I'm a Star Wars fan. But when I think about, this is our moment. When you think of everything eVTOL, it is our version of the space race. And it is ours to win, or it's ours to lose, right? And so the things that I try to do, and I was honored to sit in the administrator's chair, is can we have a framework? Can we have a forcing function? That was Innovate 2028. Can we get to a place where the U.S. maintains its global lead and never cedes to anyone? This is a bipartisan issue, right? Is that ability, again, as our tagline says, the ability to unlock the skies and think about it. We have communities that are losing essential air services, right? So how do we be a part as an agency in making that happen? First, ensuring the safety of it, but ensuring that, you know, the rule sets and those things that are attainable. Why now? For me, it felt like the right time to do it. Let me, turn around to the audience. Most of us who are outside of Washington flew in to one of 3 airports today. Now, getting to Reagan is pretty easy, but, what time does it take you to get to Dulles? That's about 45 to 50 minutes, sometimes an hour on a bad day. If you got to get to Baltimore, Washington, one of our team members, that was 2 hours yesterday. The ability to do that in 10 to 15 minutes, it is really, really life-changing. And it is certainly an evolution. I wanted to be a part of that. I'm excited. Archer, in just a few seconds remaining, it's a team. I love the rapid approach to ensuring that the level of rigor, the level of quality is there. We know the public, that gaining the public trust, it has to be safe. That is a sacrosanct. Having what I think is one of the most dynamic and incredible engineering teams is something that I thought about. I appreciate your leadership. It's also another draw for me. But the time was right, and this was the moment, and I look our better days ahead of us, and I'm just believe it is time for us, and eVTOLs will take us to a place that we only imagined, we only thought of as science fiction. This is a reality here and now.
So if you want to hear more of Adam Goldstein from Archer and when he met with Joe Ben from Joby, make sure to check out this video here.